It's good to see so many people back again after yesterday night. So we'll talk now about, yesterday we talked about new therapies, now we'll talk about registries and clinical trials and how they can add more value to the treatment of CF. So we have certain questions which I'd like to address with you. So that's, where are patients with CF? Who are these patients? What are their characteristics? For instance, mutations. Which treatment do they get? What are the results? And then the most important question, how to improve the outcome for people with CF. One of the answers is that registries and clinical trials are essential to improve the care for people with CF. And I hope to make this clear to you in the next half hour. So as Carleen already mentioned, we have this ECFS patient registry. It's now a common platform for data collection in CF patients in Europe. It started in 2003 with 8 countries, but now at this moment we have demographic and clinical data of more than 33,000 patients with CF in Europe, living in 26 countries, and the registry is still expanding. These are the countries involved at this moment. You see in dark blue the countries with a national registry. In light blue, here in Greece, patients with now a registry only supported by centers, sometimes a single center, and these countries are now joining at this really moment the registry, and there are plans also for Turkey to join, and here we are looking for partners, especially Poland, to also join the registry to make it really pan-European. For Greece, it's good to emphasize that until now, it was especially the Thessaloniki Center, and thanks to Dr. Elpis Seguru, her efforts, Thessaloniki Center joined, but there are now things going on to add also with the Athens Center. In June, the executive coordinator of the registry, Jackie Vance, was in Athens, and we are really hopeful that Athens will also join, and well, I come back later on the differences between national registries or center registries and the advantages or disadvantages. So we really have now a very good up and running European CF patient registry, and the mission is to compare all the aspects of CF and its treatment. Why is this important? We want to encourage the new standards of dealing with CF. We have the standards of care, where Carleen was already mentioning. We want to facilitate public health planning, especially in the more eastern countries, southeastern countries. It's very, the registry could be very helpful to promote CF care, to go to the government, to go to regulatory authorities, and to promote care for CF. And the third pillar is to enable research. We have this massive amount of data. People can easily ask questions to the registry. There's a specialized form for it. It's just by a scientific committee, and these data can be given to researchers also to enhance the care and research in CF. The data collection is anonymized, so only your own center, the doctor in your own center, will know these are the patients of this individual patient. Otherwise, it's all anonymized and sent to the European database. Data collection can be in 2 ways, as I mentioned. Either there will be a national registry, and most of them already have a structured database. They can just download the data in a spreadsheet and upload it to the web server of the ECFS tracker. ECFS tracker, I'll come back to that later, is a new software program, web-based, where all countries upload their data. The other option is that just a single CF center enters data directly in the tracker software, and with the push of the button, it's uploaded to the web server. So, for instance, in Greece, the Athens Center, Thessaloniki Center, and possibly other centers could just enter the data using this software, only visible for themselves, and upload it. And on a national level, there will be one data set of Greek patients. What are these variables at the moment? We collect different variables on demographics, that meaning age, gender, status of the patient, if applicable date and cause of death. Concerning diagnosis, we have age at diagnosis, sweat test, whether the patient has meconium ileus or not, and if there is neonatal screening in the country. Genotype is collected. As we stated yesterday, very important to know which genotype the patient has, especially for future therapies and trials. Growth and lung function are measured. Microbiology, for instance, if there is Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Staphylococcus aureus bacteria, and the non-tuberculous mycobacteria, where Carlene referred to, where there are new guidelines now for treatment of this bacteria. Complications are registered if a patient has diabetes or not, liver disease, pancreatic status, you have to use pancreatic enzymes or not, and also malignancy is scored because some patients develop malignancy during lifetime, especially after transplantation. Therapies are monitored, antibiotics, use of bronchodilators, if there is oxygen therapy, and use of pancreatic enzymes, and also lung and liver transplants are stored. So with this core set of data, which is gathered all over Europe in all countries, we have a massive database, all with the same variables, same definitions, which will make comparisons possible. The software we use now is the new encounter-based software, ECFS Tracker, it's called. It has been launched in June this year. So ECFS has organized and paid for the development of this software. It is the core data set, which I mentioned in the former slide, with about 50 variables. It's encounter-based, so it makes it possible to use it from any network or computer you like. You just have to certify and identify yourself that this computer is connected to the ECFS tracker network. You can do it encounter-based, so at every visit you can upload data and enter data, or just have an annual upload. And it's generating reports, the software itself, so it gives to the users directly the opportunity to say, okay, I want to know how is the lung function of my male patients from 6 to 12 years. I want to see how this is now, what are the results, and with one push of the button they get an overview in graphics and in numbers of these data. And also for individual patients, the doctor can say, okay, this patient will come tomorrow. I want to have an overview of last 3 years of lung function, BMI, medication, bacteria that were isolated, and you get a printed one-page printed document for the patient. See, okay, this is what your data are now looking like, to help and discuss what therapies are needed. So a really powerful tool to generate reports for the doctors who are using it for themselves, for individual patients, but also to have insight into the results of their own patient groups. No installation is needed, only a certificate for security, and no costs are involved because ECFS paid for the software, also for the hosting, so it's really for free. As I said, the launch was in June 2014, and during this month, and actually now at the moment, per country implementation is rolling out. And we aim to have it up and running at January 1, 2015. So the software can be used on the European level. on a country level or just at a center level. And this is, I think, a very important and powerful tool. It gives insight in diagnostics, in care and outcome on all these levels. So you can have exchange meetings or benchmark meetings. For instance, in the Netherlands we organize that all centers are sitting together once a year, looking at the results of the registry. They know from each other, this is your center, this is your center, this is your center, and look at differences. Not to point out, oh, you're doing bad. As Karin already stated, it's not that purpose, but to exchange and to see, well, why is the FEV1 in your center higher than in the other? Why do you give more treatment with, for instance, inhaled antibiotics than the other? How come? These discussions are very fruitful and give the opportunity for the individual centers and doctors and participants to see, okay, we should more focus on this. And we have really good examples that by doing this, for instance, when the BMI nutritional status was worse in one center, said, okay, we can't accept this, we have to see how we can act on this. They made a special program on it, and in 2 years' time, they saw that their BMI, which was very low compared to the others, catched up with the others in 2 years' time. So it's really a very powerful tool, using the registry data, organizing these exchange meetings, and at the beginning, doctors are very reluctant to do so, because they think they're frightened to share these data. But when you create the atmosphere, and I think patient organizations can help to organize and to promote these meetings, you can really have good benchmarks leading to actions for improvement without naming and shaming, but with looking at the opportunities for better care, better for all patients. So the registry leads to options for comparison between countries, between centers in one country, and I'll show you now some examples of the ECVAS patient registry report from 2010. It is some time ago. We are now, because the software has been updated, we are now entering from all countries data from 2011, 12 and 13, and the next report will catch up, and we expect that at the end of next year or beginning of that year the 2013 data will be available, and that the time lag will be caught up. So in all the graphics I'll show you now, you see on the axis the different countries, the abbreviations, and I highlighted the Greek one all the times. At the top panel you see the description, and here is the proportion of patients. So for instance, this is the proportion of adults above 18 years in all countries for patients who were alive in December 2010. And you see per country, so these are the children in light blue, and dark blue the adults, and you see per country the proportion of adult patients. So in Greece it was a proportion of children of about 60%. But again, notice that this is only for the Thessaloniki center so far, but we hope in the next report we can show the data for more Greek patients also from Athens. This is another example, for instance, the prevalence of the F5-way-del homozygous and heterozygous patients by country and overall. And you see that, for instance, in Greece there is about 30% patients with F5-way-del homozygous mutations, a very large proportion of heteros, one F5-way-del and the other one heterozygote mutation, and these is a group of patients of about 25% with other mutations, not 5-way-del. For lung function comparisons, Pauline already showed that the red dots are the median values, these for all European countries, and you can see how it's for the Greek population. Here are the age cohorts, 6 to 9, 10 to 14, and so on and so on. And here are the numbers. You see small numbers because it's only one center. and there are only dots when the number of patients is above 10. So you see that in the younger age group, the patients are doing quite well. Here they are above the median, and in the older age group somewhat below the median. But when you have more data, more centers, and each individual center can have these figures, you can really make good, you can really get good insight on this lung function parameters. This is another way of expressing lung function according to what we call severity group and age group. So in red you see the FEV1 less than 40%, it's a patient with really bad lung function. In gray with FEV1 between 40 and 80, and in blue with FEV1 above 80. And you see differences per country, and for Greek we have a very small group of patients below 40% and rather high amount of patients, more than 80%, there is FEV1 above 80%. But again, it's only the Thessaloniki Center with mainly children. But for the next report, it will really give more insight. And at the end, there's always the total mean for all European countries. Here you can see the prevalence of chronic Pseudomonas aeruginosa infection in patients. So now it's another way. Yes, it's orange. So you see for the Greek patients, more than 50% has a chronic Pseudomonas infection. In Russia it's even more, and here you see this is Slovenia. There you have a very low proportion of patients with chronic Pseudomonas infection. Looking at another germ, chronic Staph aureus infection, you see in Greek there are not so many patients, somewhat more than 20% who has this chronic Staph aureus infection. Also, values for height and weight, nutritional status are given. It is expressed in Z-score, and a Z-score means that the score of 0 is the mean. And between -2 and +2, almost all values, about 97% of the patients are given. So a value of 0 will say that it's the mean. And when you look at the red dots for all European countries, you see that the average is somewhat -0.5 below the mean. And comparing with the Greek center, there are some differences, but bear in mind these are very small numbers. Same accounts for weight. Again, same red dots and blue dots with somewhat variation. And BMI, but these are larger age cohorts between 2 and 7, 8 and 11 and 12 and 17. Also compare it. Then concerning the treatments, for instance, this is inhaled hypertonic saline. You see the Greek people, about 30% using hypertonic saline. Slovenia, almost all patients use it. But for instance, in Slovakia or Russia, almost none of patients use it. Pulmozyme, rhDNase, also about half of the patients in Greek are using this. And inhaled antibiotics, a lot of the patients use it. It's not so surprising because also there was a lot of Pseudomonas in these patients. So it's good that they have access to these inhaled antibiotics to use. So the output of the registry is these kind of annual reports with much more detailed information, always available also on the ECVS website, which Karin showed in her last talk. And you can approach it, you can have a look. And we are considering now also more patient-friendly versions. So we're looking to give more information so it's accessible for a broad public. There's also the opportunity to get a center report. The software will deliver it, but you can also ask the registry steering group to have a center report. And of course, very important, this database is an important source of data for research. So the activities of the ECFS Executive Committee are to have data quality projects to really improve the data that are in, because we shouldn't compare apples with pears. To make publications of it, we have newsletters and a website where you can get the information. The governance structure is that there is a code of conduct, so how do we behave, how is patient and security involved, the procedures of delivering data and getting the reports and standard operating procedures are all arranged. And this is the way it's organized. We have a contributors group, so all centers or countries who are delivering data. Then there's a steering group with representatives for each country. So national representative for Greece is now Dr. Elvis Atsiburu. They have guidance on the overall strategic. This overall guidance, they come together 2 times a year, in January and during the conference. There's a scientific committee who's looking at the review of data requests, the executive committee who gives management and advice. I'm a member of this committee. And then there's the team with the director appointed by ECFS, the executive coordinator, Jackie Morans, statisticians, and a help desk. And they are caring for all the day-to-day business. And this is the team. Jackie Morans, she's the coordinator of the registry, the statistician, Anna Zolin, and the help desk, who is really there for online support by mail, Skype, or otherwise, who can assist you in entering data and all those problems. So, as I already mentioned, you can join as a single center or as a national registry. It's really up to the country itself. But I think as patient organizations, you can promote the contribution of your center and of the centers in your country. So to create this national registry, I think it's very essential that the patient organization and the centers are working together. Contact Jackie Morans and we can organize a meeting in your country. Well, there has been a meeting in Greece just in June where Jackie was invited to instruct and communicate on these aspects. The steering group has its policies and procedures. Angelique Previtesi is also from Sea of Europe, member of the steering group, and this steering group has really a nice set code of conduct. So how do we behave? What are the rules? What can we do? What can't we do? And the other issue is financial support. There are some companies, pharmaceutical companies, who are giving support to countries who want to set up a registry. It's also good to bear in mind. So there are choices per country, national versus individual centers, on the coordination and the finances. When you want to join, you need to inform the patient, because every patient has to sign this informed consent. You have to sign if you want to give permission to add your data to this registry. On the website, there are all templates, www.ecfs.eu, where you have all the templates. So this collaboration between patient organizations and CF centers is very essential because we have the same goals. Trust is needed between all parties. The patient organization can have a key role in this registry setup. It gives insight in care for patients, for healthcare providers, for insurance and government, and it really improves the access and quality of care. There are lots of examples already in the past that really have helped to get this. And the goal is to learn from national colleagues, from different countries, from patients and patients' data, and from research. So the final part, I'll connect to some aspects of clinical trials. There is a website, clinicaltrials.gov, where you can find all clinical trials running at this moment. And when you search for CF trials, you'll see that there are hundreds of trials running at this moment with all the information, which patients can participate, which medication, which protocols, which countries. It's very informative, but you really have to look what's in it for you. There is, on the website of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, they have the pipeline, which I showed yesterday, of all the studies going on, fostered by CFF. And there is a website of the Cystic Fibrosis Clinical Trial Network. That's now a network started about 5 years ago, and there are now about 30 CF centers all over Europe participating from 12 countries, and they take care of about 15,000 patients. And right at this moment, just 2 days ago, there was an application for extension, so other centers participate. There's a procedure for that, and the CTN helps to promote clinical trials for patients with CF to make it faster, in a good way, that centers are working together, and that the process of clinical trials are enhanced so that medication could really get faster to the patient. CF Europe has also on its website, but it's now under construction, an overview of all current projects that are funded by the national patient organizations. Hilde de Keizer has done a lot of work on it. All the different countries are now filling the database with their projects, what's going on, and we hope to launch within a few weeks this part of the website of CFE. Then there are national organizations who also have on their website information on current clinical trials. For instance, in the Netherlands we have all trials in an overview, and with the information of what's the trial all about, which patients can enter, who is the contact person at which moment, and what are the results at the end of the project. And some CF centers also have information on their website on trials where you could participate. I don't know to what extent at this moment in Greek centers are participating, and patients, and you are participating in clinical trials. What we see, what we also yesterday had, there are two kinds of trials: treatment of symptoms and trials on treatment of the basic problem in CF, which are mutation specific, and which is very essential that knowledge of the different mutations is available to yourself, because you can also look yourself, hey, this trial is going on, I've got this and this mutation, would it be interesting for me? Those are clinical trials going up to the moment that the medication is available. As I mentioned yesterday, we also know these phase 4 trials, so when the medication has reached the market and patients can make use of it, it's very essential to have phase 4 trials, also called extension studies, to randomized clinical trials, also called open label studies. So you're using the medication, you know what medication you get, but it's very important to look at the drug safety on the longer term and the efficacy. Most of these studies are developed and maintained by industry, but there's now increasing possibility of these clinical registries. And for instance, ECFS Tracker is very suitable for that, where you have all this information and also historical information on individual patients' course, and you can compare the historical courses. For instance, for one patient groups, last 3 years their lung function declined. We are using now new medication, and we can see how it's going up. So we're really working now with the executive committee to use the ECFS tracker also in clinical trials, and industry is very positive about it, but of course none of the individual data are delivered to pharmaceutical companies. So it will never be possible for pharmaceutical companies to come back to you or to know, okay, this patient, I know him or her, and he is now on my medication. It's all very secure. So concerning the participation, you as a patient or parent of a child with CF in clinical trials, it's always good to look at inclusion or exclusion criteria. Inclusion, for instance, the patient has to be older than 6 years old, because then you can have lung function measurements. It's all described very well in these trials. An exclusion criteria could, for instance, be, well, in this trial we don't can enter patients with diabetes for some reasons. We only want a certain cohort of patients, so it's well defined and we can really say something about the effect. You always have to look at the burden, so it's very important that it is clear what aspects of the trial are there. Do you have to have medication once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day? How long is the study going on? Do I have to go to the hospital for measurements once, twice, 3 times? What kind of measures do they want to have and how invasive is it? So it's really good when you will be approached to participate, to look at the burden, and if you think you can incorporate it in your daily life, because you have to live on, and this is just something extra to it, but it can be very valuable to do so for yourself. So you could make use of medication which is not available yet, and you might have the chance to use it, and with that to feel better. Although, of course, there are always, especially in the phase 3 studies, there is a chance to get the medication or to be in the control group that you get medication, but you don't know if it is medication or not. But for most studies, after the study has finished, you have the opportunity to get the medication if it is useful. So there is, for instance, a phase of half a year. Some have the medication, some not. But after finishing the study, and if the results are positive, then you can get access to the medication from the pharmaceutical company until it will reach finally registration and market. So that could be very valuable, for instance, for the new medication that's coming up, mutation-specific therapies. So that's what could be in for you, and the other is what could be in for other people with CF. Sometimes you participate in trials where the benefit for yourself might be, there might be some benefit, but not very big, but it could help for future people or for future children who could benefit from the results of this therapy. So to finish, I think registries and clinical trials are really essential and a key towards better care for all people with CF, and I hope that you can all benefit from this in the near future. Thank you very much.
Μπορώ να μιλήσουμε. Θέλω να ρωτήσω, ένας ασθενής είναι σωστό να μένει σε μια μεγάλη πόλη ή στην επαρχία? Δηλαδή η μεγάλη πόλη έχει καυσαέριο, έχει θόρυβο ή στην επαρχία? Άλλη ερώτηση, η υγρασία σε μια πόλη βοηθάει ή δημιουργεί πρόβλημα? Η θάλασσα και τα λουτρά βοηθάνε τον ασθενή ή δημιουργούν πρόβλημα? Εκτός από τα φάρμακα, για να ανακουφιστεί ο ασθενής, π.χ. υπάρχει ένα βότανο? Αυτά.
That's all, and a lot of questions. I'll try to address one. The first 3 are related to the environment. What is the influence of the environment on well-being and symptoms of CF? It's difficult to give a general answer because it might be very individualized and personalized to a certain person. Some people with CF have very sensitive airways and hyperreactivity. Living then in a very dirty atmosphere could negatively influence their lung function. Like for people with asthma or COPD, it could be the same for people with CF. So I think it's very good to look at the individual patient, what will do best or not. A counterpoint could be that, for instance, in a more rural surroundings, there could be more fungus. For instance, the aspergillus is something we know in the Netherlands is certainly more there in the more rural surroundings. So for each patient, I think you should look at how is this individual patient and also relate it to your sea atmosphere. I know anecdotal information from patients who say, well, when I go to the sea, I feel better. In Belgium, they have at the sea rehabilitation center. Some of them really say, well, the atmosphere is better for me. For others, it doesn't work. So also here again, individualized looking at the situation is essential. The last question, your fourth question, was related to the use of herbs, or I think you could say it broader. Yesterday, someone came to me with other therapy. There's a lot of complementary therapies that are available and that are also used by patients with CF. But it's very difficult also here to give kind of general advice. So you should use this, you should do that. I think it's good that those complementary therapies are also investigated and try to see if some of these aspects are really useful to patients. For instance, as I described yesterday, we are looking now to two nutritional supplements who are available for a very low price and that could have an influence on CFTR function. And we try to sort this out really in a good trial to see if this is really effective or not, or might be effective for individuals. And concerning the other all therapies, I think there are hundreds of therapies which are not established yet but are available. I think if you feel as an individual that you could benefit from it and that you are convinced or have experienced that it's of benefit for you, you could use it. But it's not. It's very difficult to say about the value for all people with CF. You have an additional.
Ένας ασθενής πρέπει να εργάζεται ή όχι, και ποια επαγγέλματα απαγορεύονται?
So the question is on if patients should work or not, and if there are certain professions that are forbidden. Here again, I think there won't be a general answer. I think if you feel able to work, if you want to work, I think there won't be a rule or a measure that you say, no, you can't do this or you shouldn't do this. I think it's really up to the individual to look at his or her own possibilities to develop themselves as a human being, and work could be a very essential part of it. And to say, well, this is an area where you don't go. I think when you have to work with all kind of gases or other things that where you can really consider this won't be good for my health, you should avoid that. But it's I think really individually tailored again. Might be a disappointing answer for you, but I can't generate it.
Ευχαριστώ.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Είδαμε σε ένα slide ότι στη Σλοβενία έχουν το μικρότερο ποσοστό απικισμού από ψιλομονάδα. αν θυμάμαι σωστά. Στη
Yes.
Ρωσία έχουν το μεγαλύτερο ποσοστό. Το ενδιαφέρον ήταν στο επόμενο slide που έδειχνε τη χρήση του υπέρτονου διαλύματος. Στη Σλοβενία είχαν το μεγαλύτερο ποσοστό χρήσεως του υπέρτονου διαλύματος. Στη Ρωσία το μικρότερο. Υπάρχει κάποιος συσχετισμός μεταξύ αυτών των δύο? Καταλαβαίνετε, φαντάζομαι τι εννοώ. Εάν το υπέρτονο διάλειμμα επηρεάζει κάπως τον απικισμό των ξυλομονάδων. Αυτό.
Yeah. Yeah, very good point. And I think you can't say there is a direct association. There have been other studies performed where you can deduct a direct association from that. But this is a really good example of looking at data with subsequent questions of how come. The direct one-to-one relation there won't be, but you could say, okay, we see this. How does it come? But could there be also something, for instance, in procedures? Because it's very essential that you have good data in it. And for instance, we had one center in the Netherlands that had very low pseudomonas, but a very low lung function. And we sat with the center, and it appeared that their detection method in the lab was not sufficient. So that the insight into the data gave rise to communication, discussion, and action for improvement. So they adapted the procedures in the lab, and then they saw, okay, there is more pseudomonas, and so we have to treat them, and so we can improve the lung function. So it's very good that you notice this difference, and I think it's really a good example of, okay, we see this, how come? What are the other relations? So the one-to-one relationship, there won't be in CF, even there won't be the best CF center. There isn't the best CF center. Some centers are performing well or have a high lung function or a high BMI, but there are so many aspects of good clinical care. How do you treat your patients? How do you communicate with your patients? All these aspects are very, very important. And that's why we, for instance, now in the Netherlands, we have this time for the first, have all the centers mentioned in these overviews. So this is center Amsterdam having a FEV1 this is center Rotterdam having FEV1 this, but also with the explanation that it's just not a list of, okay, this center has a high lung function, I have to go to that. But look at all the different components to give you insight. You can discuss it with your doctor or other members of the team to discuss how does it come, how do I have to see this, and what's in it for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for now?
There's one, two more.
Okay. Turning around too quickly.
Συνήθως στη χώρα μας η καλλιέργεια φαρικικού παίρνεται μόνο με στικ από το λαιμό. Υπάρχει άλλος τρόπος πιο αποτελεσματικός ώστε το δείγμα που θα πάρθει να είναι από πιο βαθιά? Δεν γνωρίζω αν υπάρχει κάτι άλλο.
Yes. So it's a question about the way of sampling the sputum sample. In your country, especially the pharynx swab is used. It's always, and your question is, could you have more deeper samples, which would be better? Of course, it's always looking at the opportunities there are. Sometimes people get a bronchoscopy, need a bronchoscopy, and then you can have deeper samples. But in general, a cough sample is the optimal that you can get. Either induced, so you give some exaggeration in the throat, and then people cough, and you collect that data, and most of the time that's the best use. And there was one other question over there.
σε παιδί με Κυστική Ίνωση φέρει καλό να ασκείται, να κάνει παράδειγμα βόλεϊ, μπάσκετ και μετά από 16 χρόνια θα φέρει όφελος? Όχι, γιατί ειδικά το δικό μου το παιδί δεν έχει μεγάλο ύψος, ενώ οι γονείς του, εντάξει και εγώ δεν είμαι πολύ ψηλό. Ο πατέρας είναι υψηλός, το παιδί όμως δεν είναι υψηλό. Θα φέρει όφελος από εδώ και πέρα να ασκηθεί σε βόλεϊ, μπάσκετ ή σε τι άθλημα μπορεί, θα φέρει καλό να ασκηθεί, να κάνει?
So there's a question about the value of exercise for the children in this case. I think in the next talk, like physiotherapy, this will also be addressed, I presume. But in general, you could say that exercise, daily exercise, is very good for patients with CF for several reasons. And unfortunately, it has led to an increasing place in the daily treatment or advices. Of course, always, again, individualized, because you can promote exercise and movement, and you can facilitate, but you also have to individualize it to the patient. Is this really an attractive way of concerning the choice of the sports? Is this really appealing to me? Do I prefer to go with a team sport, ball games, or do I prefer with sport like tennis or badminton, or do I want to go individually and do things like running or those kind of activities? So in general, exercise is very good for patients with CF, but individualize it, tailor it to the person, what he or she can do, wants to do, to make it sustainable in the longer term.
Στο μέλι, σύμφωνα με πανεπιστημιακές εργασίες, ανιχνεύεται ψευδομονάδα. Επιτρέπεται η κατανάλωσή του από ασθενείς? Ναι, ναι.
The question was if there is Pseudomonas in honey. I'm not aware of that, but
there are some reports on bacteria in honey, but it's not a major concern because I know the Belgian nutritionist group has some advice on it in their nutritionist guidelines, but it's only for very young children that they say to, maybe like to 1 year old or so. But in general, honey is not a risk. Not Pseudomonas specifically either. There are some bacteria, but as far as I know, not Pseudomonas. We'll ask Chris, the nutritionist, when we get back and we give the information back to the Greek associations to make sure.
It's about Clostridium, not Pseudomonas.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω αν τελικά το τεστ που είπατε του υδρότα θέτει τη διάγνωση καθαρά της κυστικής ίνωσης και μήπως τελικά μπορεί να μπερδευτεί αυτή η ασθένεια με κάποια άλλη και αργήσει έτσι η θεραπεία του βρέφους. Φτάσει δηλαδή κάπου στην εφηβεία και δεν διαγνωστεί τέλος πάντων τι έχει αυτό το παιδί.
Yeah, good question. If the sweat test is the appropriate measure to diagnose, so far the sweat test is the golden standard to have the diagnosis. But we know that there are certain patients who have a sweat test value below the cutoff value where it is not clear. They have some symptoms, and this can be really an issue. Even patients, for instance, with a homozygous delta 508 mutation, some incidents, but some of them are known to have a normal sweat test. So, in a small number of patients, really a small number of patients, it could be an issue. There are some additional measurements that could be done to give more confirmation of the diagnosis. One of them is what they call NPD, nasal potential difference measurement. So in the nose, then you can measure potential differences that give an indication if the CFTR function is hampered or not. And another one is by rectal biopsy, where they do in what they call intestinal current measurements also. So you take a biopsy from the rectum, and in that piece of tissue you can also measure potential differences, and that can also give a confirmation on the dysfunction of the CFTR function. So there are some additional, but fortunately a very few people, but there are some people where still diagnosis, despite symptoms, is very difficult to confirm.
Any other questions or remarks? I noticed that there are many questions about many subjects, which is really good, that's why we're here. Maybe some people didn't have the chance or didn't feel at ease to ask their question right away now in the public. So I would suggest too that people who have additional questions can write a question on a paper and hand it to one of us or put them here. And if there's time, we'll get back to them later today. It would be a good idea too, if you have an email address, to write your email address if you want to on the paper. If there is a question which we cannot reply anymore now, we can maybe ask it to one of the speakers who was here, who is here, to get back with that question. So don't hesitate. Also, we are going to have a break soon now. Some of the speakers, most of the speakers are still here during the break. Some of the speakers have to catch a flight, so we'll not be there anymore for lunch. Well, I'm at the subject of lunch. There is still a real lunch provided after the conference too, so you're invited to stay, and some of the speakers who don't have to catch a flight may be there and you'll have time to ask your questions, but not all of us will still be there. So if you have a question, please just write it down and hand it to one of us, or put it on the table, or during this break you can ask it. Yesterday I started the welcome word with thanking some of the people who made this conference happen, but none of these people were in the room at that time, so I would like to take the opportunity now to thank them again. I want to thank the Greek Patient Association who made this happen. Without them we wouldn't be here in this nice hotel, have all these good facilities, and be able to have this conference in Thessaloniki. Some people have been working already for more than a year to get us here, and I want to especially thank some people from Thessaloniki who did a lot of work to get all the practical things arranged. I don't know if I have all the names right, but I have Sula, Angeliki, and Fotini, and there were some other people, but I have difficulties with the Greek names. And we want to thank them because it's very important. We come to a country, we were invited to come to Greece, and but of course we know the speakers, we can get some expertise to share here, but without people locally to help us to make this happen, it's not possible. So I would like to ask an applause for everyone who helped us, and also the people who were working the last 2 days to get this all organized. So thank you to all of you. I guess if we open that door, there will be something to drink behind the door again. And we come back here at 11:25. Because I know in Greece you have to be